Anime in Winter 2025. It's the first season of anime to start off this new year and get everyone ready for all the hype stuff coming out in 2025. So, just how good is anime in winter? Are we starting this year with a bang, or is it gonna be a slower season where people mostly stick to the sequels? Today I will be going through every winter anime that stood out to me and the ones I'd recommend as worth watching, which is basically every anime on this list. So, without wasting any more time, let's dive in and see what this season has to offer, starting with action. Solo Leveling Season 2 Sakamoto Days and the first and only episode of Fate Strange Fake are basically your only options when it comes to action this season. I don't know what the fuck A1 is doing with Strange Fake's release schedule, so our options basically get limited to Fat Man, aura farming and Jinwoo glazing. But thankfully both series are vastly different compared to each other, so most people are at least gonna like one of them. Sakamoto Days is a humorous action comedy about a retired hitman trying to protect his family and aura farming despite being fat. The show doesn't take itself too seriously, and it works perfectly paired with the eccentric characters and goofy plot. Sakamoto is a complete badass and it has a solid supporting cast. Heck, even the villains have some weird quirks or personality traits that make it hard to completely hate them. My only issue with the anime is that it's a less than ideal adaptation of the great manga. The animation quality and polish in Solo Leveling is way better, but Sakamoto Days is still a solid anime for people who don't want to read the manga. I don't think Solo Leveling needs an introduction considering its popularity, but yeah, Solo Leveling is back and it's way better than before. I'm someone who had quite a few issues with season 1 of the anime, but season 2 has been a massive improvement so far. The action is just as great if not better than season 1, and the scale of fights just keeps getting crazier. But most importantly, the direction is way better this season and the story feels way less disjointed. I made an entire video talking about it if you guys wanna check it out. Let's move on and see what's going on with romance anime this season. I'm Getting Married to a Girl I Hate in Class. This anime is about two tsunderes who are forced to marry each other for plot reasons. I thought this was gonna be a trashy rom-com, but it's honestly way better than I thought it was gonna be. I was expecting the tsundere gimmick to get annoying really quickly with no progression, but I was completely wrong. The characters are surprisingly mature for a high school rom-com and settle their differences and make compromises by actually talking to each other and trying to get along. There is some pretty significant progression with their relationship, and the whole hating gimmick is gone by like the third episode. There's a love triangle brewing in the background which kind of worries me, but it's been surprisingly great so far. Honey Lemon Soda. This one's a shoujo romance with a pretty boy and shy girl formula. I'm obviously not the target audience, but this was still pretty solid. It's nothing groundbreaking, but I love to see the main girl slowly coming out of her shell and making new friends. It's actually quite wholesome, but I'm not the biggest fan of the male lead, and it's pretty hard to take the bullying seriously, especially when it comes to people calling the female lead as Stone. That's just way too silly. Next up is I Have a Crush at Work. This is an office romance anime for the people who are tired of will they won't they bullshit in romance anime. The characters are already in a relationship and they get down to business in the very first episode. There's not much of a story, but it's extremely cute and wholesome to watch every single week. This one's basically a must-watch for people who just want romance and don't want to wait multiple seasons for characters to confess. Moving on to the fantasy/isekai section, the only three shows I'd recommend watching are Red Ranger Isekai, Zenshu, and the Guild Receptionist anime. The Red Ranger becomes an adventure in another world is honestly a pretty decent isekai this season. The one thing that really stood out to me was the Red Ranger not acting like the average isekai MC with no personality. Here, the main character is a fully realized character before getting isekai'd, and he still has the cheesy persona of a Power Ranger, which is surprisingly fun and refreshing to watch. The show doesn't take itself too seriously and has some pretty funny moments, plus the anime doesn't look horrible aside from the CGI scenes, which admittedly do look pretty out of place. The anime isn't a must-watch or anything, but it's a pretty fun and enjoyable isekai, which already makes it better than 90% of the genre, Zenshu. This is an anime original by Studio Mappa, where the main protagonist is an animator. Finally, something unique in the sea of endless creatively bankrupt anime that's gonna give us insight into the inner workings of anime productions. Except the fact that it's an isekai. Yes, the main character who's an animator dies and gets reincarnated into a fantasy world. I feel like there's a very obvious joke to make there, but hey, at least she didn't die from overwork. It would have been insanely morbid considering the studio animating it. Coming back to the story though, even though Zenshu ended up being an isekai, it's more akin to a fantasy anime about getting transported into our favorite movie and having the ability to change the events of the story. It's not a power fantasy anime about a lonely shut-in getting all the bitches. Zenshu feels like an old school fantasy anime, the ones which were popular before isekai was used to describe an entire genre of anime. And even though the story doesn't focus on anime production like I originally hoped, the anime still has a lot of homages and references to legendary animators and animation sequences. I'm not completely invested in the story and characters, but it's honestly a must-watch if you're a fan of animation as a whole. And finally we have I may be a guild receptionist, but I'll solo any boss to clock out on time. I don't think I need to explain the plot for this one considering the long-ass title. This one is really simple and worth watching for Rie Takahashi's performance as the main character. It is extremely fun to watch Rieri pop off and adventurers wasting her time while working as a receptionist. It's also pretty damn hype to see her soloing bosses no one else can. The anime is very simple, straightforward and pure fun. Though I don't know how much the anime is being carried by Rie Takahashi's performance or the insanely high quality opening. But now, let's move on to my 3 favorite anime this season, the ones that I look forward to the most every single week. Starting with the Apothecary Dairies Season 2. Mao Mao is back and the show is just as good as before. Some parts of Season 1 were a bit too slow burn for me, but I'm really enjoying the slice of life and slow burn moments of the story after learning about and getting attached to more characters in the palace. I don't have too much to say, but go watch Apothecary Diaries if you haven't already. It's a really great mystery and drama anime set in Imperial China with one of the best female characters in recent years. Next up is the 100 Girlfriends Season 2. This show is so fucking stupid that it's absolutely perfect. The pinnacle of harem and romance anime is back with Season 2 and it's way better and crazier than ever before. Some episodes in Season 2 genuinely feel like a fever dream because of how insane they are, and honestly Season 1 pales in comparison. The newly introduced girls are just as distinct and unhinged as before, and the already introduced girlfriends aren't just forgotten and still get a lot of time to shine in the story, which I really wasn't expecting. The more I watch 100 Girlfriends, the more I'm starting to believe that the author is unironically a genius. It's the anime that I look forward to the most every single week, and not a single episode of Season 2 has disappointed me so far. Absolute cinema and must-watch rom-com anime. And finally, last but not least, we have Medalist. This is the most heartfelt and hard-hitting anime of winter 2025. On the surface, Medalist is a sports anime about figure skating, but when you look deeper, you'll find some incredibly well-written drama and characters on their journey into the world of professional figure skating. Even though the protagonist is an 11-year-old, the anime is very real and mature when it comes to showcasing the hard work, struggles, and sacrifices that athletes and the people supporting them have to make. I was watching this anime expecting a cute and wholesome story about figure skating, but instead ended up getting a reality check when Inori breaks down crying about how she feels useless in the very first episode. Medalist is ultimately a wholesome and heartfelt story, but the realistic struggles and insecurities of characters make their eventual success even more impactful. I've already teared up multiple times watching the anime and reading the manga, along with cheering like a madman at certain parts of the story. Medalist is easily the best anime of this season, and I desperately need more people to start watching it immediately. And those were all the winter 2025 anime that stood out to me. Honestly, a pretty slow start to this year, with the sequels doing a lot of heavy lifting. But there are definitely some fun and enjoyable shows to watch every single week, especially with Blue Box, Orb and Shangri-La Frontier on their second core, continuing from fall. Leave a like if you enjoyed the video, comment down below what's your favorite anime this season, and consider subscribing for more anime content. Peace.